Week 6 of the fantasy football season. Here's the top 12 kickers. I'm ranking this week. The first guy, Justin Tucker of the Baltimore Ravens. Justin Tucker, I say each and every week, he's one of the best kickers of all time, if not one of the best kickers. He puts it through the uprights. And this week, another solid matchup where the Ravens should be in the red zone early and often at the New York Giants. I give up the 6th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. So I got him number 1. Number 2, Tyler Bass of the Buffalo Bills. So this Bill team amongst the leaders in scoring this season. And this is going to be a classic shootout with the Kansas City Chiefs and the Bills. A rematch of the AFC Championship. And Tyler Bass each and every week, he's good for anything from 8 to 12 fantasy points. And the Chiefs give up the 9th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. So this week, a lot of points are going to be on the board. And Tyler Bass is definitely a kicker I'm going to want in my lineup. And I got him at 2 this week. Number 3, Evan McPherson of the Cincinnati Bengals. So this Bengal team, they haven't really been finishing drives in the end zone over the last few weeks here. And Evan McPherson's been reaping the rewards for the most part this season with at least 6 or more fantasy points in every game this season. So right now in an indoor game in New Orleans, a team that gives up a lot of points, and they do give up the 2nd most fantasy points to kickers on the season. I think Evan McPherson, once again in this one, has a better game than he did last week. Obviously, indoors definitely helps and always a plus for a kicker. So this week here, I think he has a good ball game, possibly hitting double digits. And I got him in number 3. Number 4, Ryan Suckup of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So a solid matchup with the Pittsburgh Steelers that give up a lot of points, especially the high-powered offenses like this Tampa Bay team. And this season's been a great year here for Suckup. 7 or more fantasy points in every game this season. So he's one of the better kickers in the league, in my opinion. He's been more accurate this season as well, kicking a little deeper than 45 yards, where in years past he had trouble with those 40-plus yarders. But this season, it's been a good one for him so far. His Tampa Bay offense is getting healthy and scoring the football pretty well. And I got him in number 4, number Oku of the Atlanta Falcons. So young Oku, when he plays at home, this guy's one of the best kickers in fantasy football. Just when he's on the road, the numbers don't translate like they do at home. But right here, you guessed it, Week 6 is a home game versus San Francisco 49ers. And we know this Niner defense is vicious. We know they don't give up a lot of touchdowns. And a lot of teams, they got to settle for field goals. So obviously with all these factors playing, and it's good it's a home game for young Hoku. It's good that the Atlanta Falcons don't score a lot in the red zone as it is, and that the 49ers hold a lot of teams out of the end zone. So this week, I think young Hoku's going to get a few opportunities, and I could see this Niner team holding them down to the mid-teens, low 20s at worst here, where young Hoku's going to get 2 or 3 opportunities. So this week here, I like the matchup here for him, and I got him at 5. Number 6, Will Lutz of the New Orleans Saints. So Will Lutz, the last few weeks here, he's emerged as a fantasy option and a guy widely available still in about 80% of fantasy leagues. So the last few games here for Lutz have been his best ones yet. Week 4 versus Minnesota, 7 fantasy points. And Week 10 versus Seattle, 9. So this week here, great matchup on paper versus Cincinnati. That gives up the most fantasy points to kickers on the season. Will Lutz, a few seasons ago in the Drew Brees days, he was one of the better kickers and most accurate kickers in football. Then injuries have played a toll. I think he's finally healed and he's looking good for the Saint team. So right now, this week, I got him pretty high on the list. And I got him in number 6 with a good matchup versus Cincinnati that gives up the most points to kickers. Number 7, Matt Gay of the Los Angeles Rams. So Matt Gay, it hasn't been good the last few weeks here for this Ram offense. And he's not really getting the opportunities. But this week here, I think this Carolina defense could cure some of the problems because their defense really don't stop anyone. I know this ball game is another indoor game as well, which is always a plus in SoFi Stadium here for the Los Angeles Rams. And Matt Gay, he's been a pretty solid kicker. It's just the problem's been this season and the last few weeks especially, he's not getting the opportunities. So if he's going to get more opportunities, he's going to move up, obviously, the rankings weekly more. But this week here, I got him in number 7. Number 8, Graham Gano of the New York Giants. So Graham Gano, another guy widely available in about 75% of fantasy leagues, and he delivers weekly. Now 4 games in a row with double-digit fantasy points. And this is a Giant offense that settles for a lot of field goals. They don't finish a lot of drives in the end zone, and that's just great news for Graham Gano. So right now, if he's out there in your fantasy league and you don't have a great kicker or a guy I'm not listing on this list, go get Graham Gano, because this week here versus Baltimore, I think we see more of the same, where the Giants aren't going to finish a lot of drives off, and they're going to have to settle for Graham Gano field goals. So this week here, I like Graham Gano as an option, It's another home game here for the Giants, and I got him in number 8. Number 9, Brandon McManus of the Denver Broncos. So this Bronco team, another team that they just don't finish in the end zone. Russell Wilson's banged up. He hasn't looked good at all this season, except maybe you could say the Week 4 ball game versus the Las Vegas Raiders. But besides that, Brandon McManus is a consistent guy on this Denver Bronco offense and putting points on the board. So this season, he had 3 out of the 5 games with double-digit fantasy points. And this week here, Week 6, another indoor game as well with the Los Angeles Chargers. That's always a good thing. He's got a good boot. And like I said, they're not finishing drives in the end zone. But the Broncos aren't scared, obviously, as well, to throw him out there for 50-plus yarders. We saw it in Week 1. Hackett threw him out there for a 60-plus yarder, and he missed it 10 in the ball game. But anyway, Brandon McManus has been a pretty solid kicker. And just the situation over in Denver where they got to settle for field goals. I like him this week. Week at number 9, number 10, Mason Crosby of the Green Bay Packers. So Mason Crosby, another guy out there in tons of fantasy leagues. And with bye weeks and kickers struggle, and he's a guy that definitely deserves to be in the top 10 this week. And he's been producing the last few weeks here, is Crosby. So a good matchup versus the New York Jets this week here, where I think the Packers will be living in the red zone the majority of the ball game, even though this Jet defense has improved from last season to this season. But I think Aaron Rodgers in this offense is fed up after blowing last week's game. And this week they're going to get the ball down the field quicker with more urgency. And that's going to mean more opportunities for Crosby. So the last 2 weeks here for Crosby, Week 4 versus New England, 9 fantasy points. And Week 5 versus the Giants, 10. So this week, anywhere from 7 to 10 fantasy points is definitely a possibility. And he still plays in a pretty solid offense. And he's still a kicker that could put it through the uprights. I got him at 10. Number 11, Brett Maher of the Dallas Cowboys. So a tough matchup versus Philadelphia, no doubt about it. But Brett Maher, he's been a solid kicker, believe it or not, in his 3rd stint with the Dallas Cowboys now, where he's been on the team for 1 year, then he was gone a year, came back, gone again, and now he's back. But the last few games here for Maher, he's had double-digit fantasy games, 4 games in a row. So Philly, I know, gives up the least amount of fantasy points to kickers. I know it's a Sunday night football game. The wind's probably going to be howling over there in Philly. But Brett Maher, he's doing his thing right now. He's getting the opportunities. And this Cowboy team's another offense with Cooper Rush at quarterback, where they don't finish drives off in the end zone more times than not, and where Mark goes out there and he's trying 40, 50-yarders, and he's been putting them through. So this week here, not a great matchup, but he's still a guy I have confidence in as a top 12 kicker, and I got him at 11. And the 12th and final kicker I'm ranking this week here is Greg Joseph of the Minnesota Vikings. So Joseph last season, it was a great year for him with Minnesota, but this season here, it's just been too up and down, and he's missed a decent amount of field goals here. Last week, it was a horrible ball game for Joseph, where he only had 3 fantasy points on 3 extra points, and he missed 2 long balls as well from 50-plus. So right now, he's not kicking the long ball. He's only had 2 good fantasy games this season. But Week 6 here in a nice, obviously, Miami climate, where that ball's going to travel because of the heat, most likely. I think he's still a serviceable kicker. I still think he's a guy that could put up points. And we did see it 2 weeks ago where he had 14 fantasy points in New Orleans. So maybe for some reason he's just not kicking good at home, which has been the case in 2 ball games this season here for him. But I'm going to give him another shot this week in the top 12. And I got him at 12, so that's the top 12 kickers I'm ranking here for Week 6 of the fantasy football season.